Welcome to Next Steps, a podcast from Black Hawk Church in Madison, Wisconsin, where together we'll take next steps to grow in our relationship with Christ, to be formed into the kind of people He's created us to be, and to better love and serve those around us. Let's jump in.
Well, hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Black Hawk Church's Next Step podcast. I am Michael, and I'm with Veronica. I'm the pastor of College-Age Ministry Internships. And Veronica, what do you do here at Black Hawk Church?
That's a great question. I think people ask that all the time. Like,
Yeah.
why is she here? I'm the Associate Director of Spiritual Formation.
That's awesome. And we have some great courses starting up, which you kind of oversee. So
We do. Yeah,
that's
I'm
really
excited
exciting.
about them. I'm teaching one this semester.
Oh, which one?
Prayer.
Oh, that's awesome. Is that the one at downtown?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, that's so cool. I hope a lot of people and college students sign up for that.
Yeah.
Well, hey, we are so excited for this episode. Most of this episode will be us talking about this past Sunday message that our downtown campus pastor, Adam Penning, talked about. It was really how to navigate the exclusive claims of Jesus. And like we say on most of these podcasts, if you have not watched or listened to that message, we want to just encourage you to go ahead and hit pause on this one and then listen to that and then join us, because honestly, it was a really good conversation that Adam led us in. And I'm excited for us to talk about it and really the subject that he really went into.
Yeah, me too. But before we get there, we did this last week. We started with a fun question and we liked it. I had no idea if you guys liked it, but we're going to do it again.
They all liked it. Everyone listening told me.
I hope so. So, Michael.
Yes.
What is something you do that can be done theoretically multiple ways, but you think there's only one right way to do it?
Okay, so here is a little spoiler. Veronica told me that she was going to ask me this question.
I did.
And I don't have one thing. I have a list.
Oh, no.
You don't know what I'm going to say.
No, he didn't tell me his answers,
Okay,
people.
I'll try to go quickly, but I feel pretty passionate about these things. Okay,
Amazing.
and I know that there's a divide here on a lot of these things, and some people might think I'm a little out in left field, but that's okay.
I'm getting ready for some hot takes.
Here's some hot takes with Michael. I am a sock then shoe guy, and then a sock then shoe. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, so when I put my socks and shoes on, I always do my left foot first, sock on, and then I have to put my shoe and tie it, and then I have to put my right sock on, and then I put my right shoe on.
I wish people could see the hand motions that you're doing.
I wasn't even making quick hand motions. I was like balling my fist and like punching. So yeah. All right. So that's debated. People think there's
Yeah.
multiple ways. There's only one way.
Mhm.
Another one, I can never have any dishes left in the sink. My sink has to be clean and free of dishes.
Wow.
If I'm like when I'm cooking before I eat my food,
Mhm.
I have to clear all of the dishes from my sink.
What?
Nothing ever at night. There is never a dish that sits or soaks overnight.
Wow.
I can't have it. I
Wow.
also don't have kids.
Wow. Yeah, that might change later. We'll see.
Yeah.
I don't know.
All right. Okay. A couple more. I will only there's rarely any time that I'll ever break this, but I only refill my gas on my car when it's on fumes. Like I'm talking about, it has to be past
Wow.
empty.
Living life on the
So-
edge there.
And I got that from my mom. Where she's like, yeah, just why waste time? And so that's another one. Okay, only a couple more. I only wash my jeans once a year.
What?
Yeah, once a year.
What do you do with them in between? Just nothing? Just
Nothing.
roll with it?
Yeah, I
Again.
read that it's not good to wash your jeans.
I just want to note that you do not have kids. I feel like
I don't have
weekly
kids.
I get like peanut butter or something on my jeans. So,
Well, I spill all the time, but I just wipe it off.
well, I mean, yes, I guess. I guess.
Okay, I have a couple more. On Spotify, like the yearly,
Yeah.
review, I'm an anthem listener. And so this is really true. I will hear a song and it'll just really speak to me.
Hmm.
I will literally play that song 500 times in 2 weeks and only listen to that song
Wow.
on repeat until just one day I'm done with it and I never want to hear it again and I go to another song.
Wow.
That's the way.
I feel like I'm learning so much about you right now.
I got one more.
Okay, great. Let me
If
have
people
it.
are still listening, they're like, this guy is, I don't know about
Mine
him.
is going to be so sad compared to this.
Okay, so this is kind of the weird one.
Okay.
I,
The other
as
ones
if-
weren't weird
yeah,
at
as
all.
if the other ones were totally normal. I feel like whatever. We've already been going for it. So I eat the same thing every day. Like for breakfast, I eat the same thing. For lunch, I eat the same thing. For dinner, I eat the same thing. Not like the same thing for each meal,
Sure.
but
Yeah,
for
I get
lunch,
what
I
you mean.
have my lunch. For dinner, I have my dinner. I've been
Like-
eating it for like that for years. When I go to a restaurant, I find the first thing that I like, and that's what I order. I don't
Wow.
like to shift. I don't like to step out of bounds. I know what I like, and I don't want to be disappointed.
Wow. Okay. That is, these are some hot takes. Wow. I'm impressed.
There you go.
Okay,
I could go
great.
on, but I'm going to stop.
Yeah, I think you probably should.
All right. So, how about you, Veronica?
Okay. I have two. The first, I feel like if my husband is listening to this podcast, he'll understand. I feel like there's only one way to drive, and
Oh.
I am not really an anxious person, but I get anxious riding in cars with other people driving, particularly my husband, because
Okay.
he does not drive the way I would like him to drive. And
I'm
he doesn't drive.
leaning in right now.
He
for
doesn't
everyone
drive
who can see
unsafely.
this.
To be clear, for anybody that knows Dan Hummel, he's a safe driver. I would never be concerned about it. But for some reason, I just get weird when he's driving.
Well, when I think of Dan Hummel, the first thing I think of is safe driver. So,
I mean, yeah, doesn't he
and
just look
historian
like a
author.
guy who's like a safe driver?
Yeah, he does.
So there's that. And then the other thing that is extra weird is when I eat like M&Ms in particular, but any type of small candy like that, I like to sort I can't even say it with a straight face. I like to sort them by color and also eat them in pairs. like
Noah in the ark, like
Yes.
2 by 2.
Yes, exactly like that. If Dan wants to troll me, he'll give me like a handful of M&Ms and he'll make it like 5 and like all different colors. I'll just be
And
like,
that
why are
was
you
your
doing this
biggest
to me?
fight,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Obviously. Okay. Well,
Oh, that was great. Well,
everyone stopped listening
for
now.
the one person who still held on, we welcome you. We thank you, and we're so glad that you're here for this conversation.
Welcome to Black Hawk Church, where there's a bunch of weirdos here.
A bunch of weird. I think we can own it.
I think
we're
so.
a bunch of unique people.
Yeah.
You know?
We all have...
little snowflakes, right? Every snowflake is unique. Okay, we got to move on.
All right.
Let's talk about exclusive claims of Jesus. That's awesome. So, for those of you listening, just to kind of recap, Jesus made a couple just exclusive claims in the New Testament that were recorded in the Gospels, different things that he said about him that really made listeners and readers up to this day respond in a lot of different ways. For example, here's a very popular exclusive claim that Jesus made. It can be found in John 14:6. Jesus answered, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." It's perhaps one of the most exclusive claims that Jesus made. And, like I said, a lot of people respond in different ways. And I'm curious, Veronica, how have you typically responded with exclusive claims or this particular exclusive claim that Jesus has made?
Yeah. This one was a struggle for me when I first started learning about Jesus and learning about Christianity and my faith, and was a little bit of a barrier for me to like really making that final decision to follow Christ and to submit my life to him. And I think just not growing up in the church, I knew and loved a lot of people, including my parents, that didn't follow him. And so the idea that they were not going to be, I don't know. I think I was worried that like they wouldn't be good people or something like that. And I didn't really want to think about the idea of like eternal life without them, without these people that I loved in my life. And so I think that was a struggle for me initially. And over time, talking through it, kind of asking some more questions, I really think the the concept of like a universal morality or
Mhm.
universal truth really helped me kind of overcome that barrier. In particular, I'm a big C.S. Lewis fan. This is a fun
Oh, yeah.
fact. I'll just throw this in here. Our son Jack, one of our kids,
Mhm.
is named after C.S. Lewis
Oh, no way.
because his family called him Jack.
Yeah. Mhm.
So, anyways, there you go.
I'm a fan too, and I knew that. There you go.
There you go.
That's
See?
awesome. Hey, Jack.
So,
Yeah.
Mere Christianity was one of the first like sort of Christian books that I read, and it really
Yeah.
resonated with me and made a big difference in my life. And so he's got this quote in Mere Christianity where he says, "A man who was merely a man and said the sort of things that Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher," which,
Yeah.
side note, is an argument that a lot of people make, right?
Yeah.
So back to C.S. Lewis. He would either be a lunatic on the level with the man who says he is a poached egg, or else he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman or something worse. And I mean, that's a pretty stark
Yeah.
quote right there. And I think sometimes it's hard for us to get all the way there. But I think it was really helpful way to frame it for me to think through, like, if I was going to take Jesus seriously and the other claims he was making, I could not ignore this one. Like,
Yeah.
I had to include this in the other claims that he was making. If he died for my sins, I had to also believe that he was the way, the truth, and the life. And so I think that putting it in those perspective was really helpful for me, and kind of making that final sort of step into saying, like, okay, Jesus, I'm all in with you on this.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks for sharing that. And I remember when I was younger, I started seriously following Jesus, like making the decision, okay, he is the way, the truth, the life for me when I was 15, 16. I was a junior in high school. And I remember reading Mere Christianity. It was a very really, really formation heavy book in my faith when I was younger. But the idea of liar, lunatic, and Lord was really powerful for me. But I don't know, like for me growing up, it's really interesting in this series. There's been so many different things when it comes to deconstruction that I'm like, yeah, I've really deconstructed in this area when it comes to science and its relationship with the Bible. That's probably one of the biggest ones for me. Suffering, yeah, in some ways, that how can a loving God just allow different things to happen? But I feel different when it comes to the exclusive claims that Jesus has made, because when I was younger, my grandparents and my parents, they raised me and my brothers and my sister to really, really believe that Jesus was the way, the truth, the life. So my youngest kind of formidable memories was that Jesus was Lord. This is kind of weird, but whenever we would like hurt ourselves, or I would stub my toe, my mom would say, okay, you got to pray, say Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And I was just like a little 5-year-old praying, because Jesus was the one that would heal and take my pain away and stuff like that. So I never really wrestled with the exclusive claims of Jesus. And I say that by saying I know that a lot of people do.
Yeah.
And and I think with this, there's kind of a scale that people will deconstruct on different areas. Some like, oh man, we're taking a deep dive here, or some like, not that much. I'm the not that much one here. But that doesn't mean that I haven't, really deconstructed areas like, okay, is there even a God? Like I definitely have before. Or the resurrection, really? Like we're all gonna raise up again someday. Like okay. I've deconstructed different areas and really reconstructed with people in a healthy way. But this was one where I don't know, just because of my upbringing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fine. I think that's to be expected, especially in a series like this where we're covering a lot of different topics.
Yeah.
I mean, there are probably not many of them, maybe suffering, that don't actually touch every single person. Like, we're going to be at different places. So I think I said, like, science and faith was not a huge struggle for me. It's not something that I really had to deconstruct. And so this is one for you. So I think that's fine.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side, right, like one of the ways that helped me get past this hurdle was like the idea of a universal truth or universal morality. But now that's actually a huge barrier for a lot of people in American culture, where there's this rise in this like post-truth beliefs, and especially with the rise of social media and partisan news sources. There's a lot of bending truth to align with what we want to be true. creating facts that feel like they align with what we want. And we talk a lot about like my truth or your truth,
Yeah.
there's really no like real truth
It's a post-truth
out there.
culture. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so. And I work with college students, and it's interesting. A lot of, on the campus, at least in my experience, that's very, very true. It is like a post-truth. Okay, well, that's your truth, but this isn't my truth. And on one hand, honestly, I do see the empathy behind that.
Mm-hmm.
And I do see kind of the beauty in a way of, hey, I don't want to offend you, and I want to
Yeah.
really try to understand where you're coming from
Mm-hmm.
and really listen and just value your mindset and your worldview.
Yeah.
I think that could be beautiful.
Yeah.
That's empathy. But the idea of saying that certain truth is just not true,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of pretty tricky, and I
Yeah.
think that's actually really dangerous. So when Jesus made the claim in first century Rome that he is the way, the truth, and the life, in this culture, our culture today, that's offensive.
Mm-hmm.
But especially in his culture then, that was really offensive. It wasn't typically a post-truth culture. He was really, really confronting a lot of different ideologies around like Yahweh and who God is. So Jesus was just offending everyone in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, he really did. So we're gonna dive a little bit deeper on some of those things that Jesus said because Adam brought them up on Sunday, and we're gonna talk about the same passages that he talked about. But he was really covering a lot of ground, and there's only so much that you can say in a Sunday message, and that's actually why we have this podcast. So we're gonna dive a little bit deeper. So, like you said, a lot of the Jewish believers that Jesus was talking to in these passages had a very specific view of God and the Messiah, and it would have been scandalous for Jesus to claim to be one and the same with Yahweh. For
Hmm.
God to be human was just inconceivable to them at the time. So when he says in John 10:30, I and the Father are one, and in
Yeah.
John 8:58, very truly I tell you, Jesus answered, before Abraham was born, I am. Like, these don't sound necessarily like bold statements to us when we read them, but they would have been huge to the ancient Jews.
Yeah, it's interesting. It was a couple hundred years where early Christians wrestled with the idea that was later formed into the Trinity, to where Yahweh, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit were three kind of separate entities, but also the same entity. And we don't have a category for that in the
Yeah.
physical world. That's something that is a mystery in a way, which I
Mhm.
think that if God is bigger than anything that we can fathom, I think it's okay and actually fitting that there's a mystery around who God is.
Yeah.
But especially back then, I mean, we had a couple hundred years to wrestle and kind of land, okay, we're going to call it the Trinity.
Yeah.
But back then, Jesus was saying that he was Yahweh.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very, 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 very bold. But I mean, throughout everything that Jesus did, one, you can just see throughout all the prophets,
Mm-hmm.
when they wrote about a coming Messiah, he fulfilled them. And
Yeah.
so it wouldn't have been a surprise. And the gospel writers were kind of understanding that, oh, okay, Jesus really was the Messiah. He is Yahweh. We don't really understand it, but he is the way, the truth, and life.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was definitely scandalous.
Yeah, and we have, the benefit of having all of the scriptures in one place and being able to reference them sort of at will and being able to draw those lines and have history on our side of believers over thousands of years that have believed these things. But at the time, it was brand new. He was just out there making these claims, and they were really taking a huge step of faith and a
Yeah.
bold risk to believe him when he was saying these things.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you mentioned another verse earlier, John 14:6.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus answered, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
Mm-hmm.
And then another passage is John 3:16 through 17.
Mm-hmm. The beloved passage
The
by most people.
beloved. You'll see it at sports events all the time. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him.
Mm.
So, what do you think about these ones?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the first Bible verse that I can remember was John 3:16, and it wasn't until later that I understood kind of the benefit or really the power of adding 17 to that as well. That God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him.
Mm-hmm.
Just the reality that we need saving and
Mm-hmm.
that God came down to save his people through him and what he's done. It really gets at the kind of heart of God and the character of God. I mean,
Yeah.
back in, early first century Rome, even in different ancient Near East cultures, their different concepts of God was very different than a loving God who
Mm-hmm.
would embody a human and suffer with and for humanity in order to redeem humanity. That's unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, different gods, humans were there to serve the gods and to
Right.
maybe produce crops to give to the gods or whatnot. And this reality that Jesus was saying that, man, I am Yahweh, I am
Mm-hmm.
he, and he's coming here, and his posture again is he was a suffering God, but he also was a God who healed,
Mm-hmm.
a God who loved. Um, he made some pretty exclusive claims that he was God, the way, the truth, and the life, but he also made some pretty exclusive claims about his love for us and demonstrated it in a way that I think no one was expecting. And
Mm-hmm.
again, we're sitting on 2,000 years of history to
Yeah.
help us understand that. But back then, that was pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, even talking about it now, it just requires a little bit of faith on our part to
Yeah.
go all the way there, right?
Yeah.
Like we still don't have scientific evidence or documentation or we have documentation in the Bible, but we don't have the kind of tangible proof, I think, that could get us 100% there that says, like, no, we know for sure someone has come back in time and said that Jesus is the only way to
Yeah.
God. We don't have that.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you bring that up. So Chris Stolson and I, we were the series captains for this. And again, that meant that we spent a day where we just thought, okay, we want to do some type of a series, maybe on apologetics, really kind of defending Christianity, and that was the idea. And then I was like, we should really talk about deconstruction and reconstruction. And we wrestled with that for a while, and then we mapped out, okay, what types of subjects do we think are beneficial for Black Hawk and listeners to really go through? And after we kind of laid that framework, Chris brought about this kind of thing called the faith scale. I think his son actually came up with it, but we thought about infusing the faith scale in every talk that we were going to do. And for those who might not be familiar with the faith scale, which might be a lot, Chris has brought it in different sermons in the past, but here's the idea. So the scale is 0 to 100, and the scale is, okay, what rational things would make me believe, let's say in this conversation, that Jesus is God?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, C.S. Lewis, he had a good argument. He's either a liar, a lunatic, or a Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Great. You brought up this idea of this just universal morality. Okay, that kind of points to God. Jesus was fulfilled a lot of prophecy in the Old Testament. That kind of tips you up on the scale, and different things like eyewitnesses recorded Jesus, or extra biblical material. So Josephus, he was a Jewish historian. He, in some of his writings, talked about this guy named Jesus in this movement. So there's all of this kind of this robust resources that are viable and reliable, that we can say, okay, there's something to this Jesus.
Yeah.
And the more kind of convinced, or the more open we are to that reality that Jesus is God, the more the scale kind of tips up. And in the faith scale, if it tips over 50%, like even if you're at 51%, that means that more of you than not believes that Jesus is God. So it's safe to say, like, okay, you are God. I want to follow you. And some people might be at a 60% when it comes to Jesus as God, or 70% or an 80%.
Yeah.
But no one's at 100% because we're not Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
Thomas stuck his finger in the nail-pierced hand of Jesus. He
Yeah.
physically saw and talked with the resurrected God. He had 100% proof. Thomas and the early disciples had 100% proof that Jesus was God, that he was the way, the truth, the life. I might, let's say, because I shared earlier, I really kind of believed a lot of what my parents told me and all the
Mhm.
different arguments that I just laid out. I might be maybe at an 80% when it comes to this,
Mhm.
but I'm not Thomas.
Yeah.
So there's a 20% gap that we call the faith gap. And we all have a gap. And as long as the gap it doesn't dip below 50%, then more than not of us believe in Jesus. But we're never going to be 100%. And that's why, like, there's so many different things that Jesus and that different New Testament writers will talk about how faith is important.
Mhm.
Like, we need faith.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you got to share that here because I think it's just a really interesting concept and I hope it's helpful for some people too.
Yeah, I think it's helpful because for me, when I was growing up, honestly, I'm like a all or nothing guy in a lot of things. And I remember before I made the decision to follow Jesus, I was under 50%. My
Mm-hmm.
thought was, hey, I'm not convinced. But
Yeah.
even when I popped a little bit above 50%, I think it was kind of like a 6-month journey when I was a junior in high school. I really wrestled because I didn't have 100%
Yeah.
proof. I wrestled with okay, so I have to have faith. I'm going to risk everything
Mm-hmm.
for this. Like if I'm following Jesus, my morality is changing. My lifestyle is changing. My habits are changing. I'm going to be praying. My lifestyle will change in a significant way when I'm not 100% certain
Yep.
why.
Yeah.
But the reality is, if Jesus is who he says he is, and again, for me to believe that there is a scale of faith, I
Mhm.
have to have faith right now.
Mhm.
I'm not 100% convinced on that. But if Jesus is who he says he is, then he loves me.
Yeah.
Then he is resurrecting me after he comes back.
Mhm.
There's this reality that Jesus, I mean, he's everything.
Yeah.
And I want that. So I'm willing to trust that, even though I won't be fully convinced until the day that he does resurrect me.
Mhm.
So, yeah. And so maybe I'll just say, kind of, for those of you listening right now, if you're wrestling with this idea that, man, you when you look at your faith in Jesus, you're not at 100%. You're never going to be.
Yeah.
And that rub, that tension that you feel is not a problem to solve because you can't. No one can.
Mhm.
But it's something to manage. It's something to say, like, hey, do I want to say that, yeah, God, Jesus, I'm going to trust you. And it's okay if you're not at that point. But yeah, I think that's a decision that we all have to come to make. And that's why I love, going back to courses. We have so many different courses that we can take, so many different groups where wherever you're at on your faith journey, maybe you're at a 20% or a 10% or a 5%. Great. Come to Blackhawk. Come to our courses.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to believe to belong.
Right. Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, is that our tagline? If not, it should be.
Yeah,
You
it
don't
is
have to
now.
believe to belong.
We'll talk to Matt.
Okay, great.
Well, with that, we just have a little bit of time left. So again, we talked about the faith scale. We're not going to convince people right now that Jesus is God, even
Right.
though, like, read the New Testament. It's phenomenal. Read the Old Testament. There's a lot of prophecy about Jesus.
Mhm.
But maybe we can spend the last bit of time talking about some other bold claims that Jesus made, some claims about his love for us.
Mhm.
Just because I think that no matter where you're at on the faith scale or your journey, it's important to know that Jesus made some other bold things about you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, maybe we can dip into the parables a little bit.
Yeah, I love it. Love a parable.
Cool.
So we're going to start with Luke 15, 1-7, and I'll start reading. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Then Jesus told them this parable. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors and says, "Rejoice with me. I have found my lost sheep." I tell you that in the same way there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent.
I love that.
Me too.
I love the bold claim here. There's, for those who might remember, a really popular song a handful of years, Reckless Love, that, I think it was right before Waymaker was the popular song. Waymaker got a lot of us through, the 2020, 2021, but
Yeah.
Reckless Love, there's a part of that talks about this parable. He
Yeah.
leaves the 99.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe I'll just share what the bold claim about
Yeah.
his love that really resonates with me. So back in this culture, shepherds, it wasn't a reckless thing. I'm going to use the word reckless. It wasn't in honor of the song. And maybe after this, you can sing Reckless Love for us, Veronica.
No, thank you.
Okay. But the reckless thing wasn't that a shepherd or Jesus, the shepherd, would leave 99 for the one.
No.
That wasn't reckless. I mean, that would happen all the time. If there was a shepherd lost a sheep, then he would ask a neighboring or a friend shepherd, like, "Hey, I'm going to go after my sheep that's gone. Can you watch the 99?" That was pretty common practice. That wasn't reckless. I think that's our posture, and we think like, "Oh, he's leaving 99 for one. Like, oh my gosh, he doesn't care." No, that's not the thing at question. But verse 1 is really important here. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. And then verse 2, but the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Jesus responds by this parable. So that one sheep, Jesus is saying that one sheep is that sinner, is that tax collector, is that person that you don't think belongs in the kingdom of God, that you don't think belongs in eternity with Yahweh. But Jesus says, I'm going to leave all of them for that one. I'm going to chase them down the countryside. And it doesn't matter if that sheep, and we don't know if that sheep intentionally was like, I'm gone, and booked it, or it was by just accident. It was just we don't know.
Yeah.
But the heart of God is, I'm going to go towards the person that you think is the least likely to belong.
Yeah.
And I just think that's powerful. It was bold back then because tax collectors and sinners, they weren't a part of the fold. They just weren't.
Yeah.
No one treated them that way. But Jesus made a bold claim to say, this person is.
Yeah.
And I actually came and I will die and rise again for them. And I think that's just a really powerful claim. And for me or for anyone else, like there's this reality that we can feel that we've really blown it. That we've messed up. Yeah. If someone knew what I did, they would not want to hear me teach, or they would not continue to listen to this podcast. We all have different realities where we think we really blew it. And God's posture is like, man, I'm going to run after you. I'm going to chase you. Yeah. I'm going to lift you up, and I'm going to bring you back. And I think that's just it's a bold claim that we just really need to sit with.
Yeah. Even just feeling like, if you're new to faith or new to church, feeling like you don't belong, like, oh man, I don't make the cut. I haven't read through the whole Bible. I don't have any scripture memorized. I don't look or act or dress like these people here in this building. I remember feeling that way when I first started going to churches. Like, I mean, I didn't even know the order of a Sunday service. I didn't know what to do. I walked in that building. I had no idea what was going on. But so I think this parable really spoke to me during those times that like I didn't have to look or act or behave a certain way. And if I didn't feel like I fit in, like it was okay. Jesus was still there for me as much as he was for the rest of the people in the room.
Yeah. It's this reality that often humans, followers of God, can create constructs of, this is what it looks like to be in. This is what it looks like to be out. Yeah. And Jesus demolishes those constructs, and he says that everyone is created in my image and everyone belongs. And my hope is that they'll respond and say, all right, pick me up, put me on your shoulders, bring me to your fold. Yeah. Because the reality is we can get to the place where Jesus is chasing us down, and we can say, don't pick me up. You leave me. Yeah. And he's going to run after and plead. But when we submit and say, all right, I don't understand your fold. I don't even know if I fully believe you're my shepherd. But if I submit and let you pick me up, man, like that's a beautiful place of belonging that we can go to.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
well, maybe the last one that we can talk about, well, let's not read it because it's a lot, but the parable of the lost son, another lost parable. For those of you who might not be familiar, I'll just kind of do a quick recap, and then we can talk about this, just the bold claim of love that Jesus is showing through this. So Jesus, he was talking. So after the parable of the lost sheep, there's a quick parable that Jesus talks about in Luke about the lost coin, and then he goes into the lost son. And this is one where there's this man who had two sons, and the younger son was like, "Father, give me your share of the estate." He did. The son pieced out. He left and spent it all on wild living, and then he was out of money and he needed money. So, like a lot of college students right now, maybe. I'm not relating college students to the parable of the lost son. Anyways, but then he hired himself out to a citizen of that country in the foreign land to feed his pigs. And the parable goes that he longs to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one would give him anything. So finally, he's like, "Oh man, what am I doing? I got to go back to my father, and at least he might have mercy on me and let me just be like a servant in his household." So he goes and makes the trek back home. And when he was far off, his father saw him, had compassion for him, ran to him, threw his arms around him, kissed him. And he's like, "Man, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against earth. I've sinned against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father just put his best robe on him, put a ring on him, sandals on his feet. And then he got a fatted calf and killed it for him and threw this big celebration for him. And it ends with him saying, "For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." So they began to celebrate.
Mhm. Whew.
What's your hot take on this?
I mean, there's just
There's
so
a lot.
much happening in this parable, right? And I think it's funny because I feel like when you talk to people about the parable of the lost son, it is like very divisive. Like I feel like
Mm-hmm.
people have really strong opinions
Yeah.
about this. But the thing I love about it is, you like mentioned it earlier, but that he willingly goes back. Like he goes back to his father and to his family. And I think that's the crucial part for
Yeah.
us, right? Is going back to God and going to him every single time, because
Yeah.
we all screw up still. Even after we've been following Jesus, we will screw up, or we will wander, or we'll,
Yep.
stop being as devoted and as faithful as we want to be. And the key there is to just keep going back.
I love that. Last night I was speaking at our College-Age Ministry, and we just finished a series about the wilderness, when we find ourselves in different wilderness situations, just hard struggles. And there was something that I shared about my personal life when I was growing that I wanted to encourage college students, and it was really about worth.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many times that we hold a mirror up, and whatever people see, like whatever people think about us,
Mm-hmm.
often we're like, "Okay, that's my worth." If they think I am attractive, oh, I guess I'm attractive. If they
Yeah.
don't think I am, oh, I guess I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
We can tend to be so responsive to what other people or social media, anything in our surrounding can say, but that can be so destructive because that's not truth. And I encouraged, and this is the coming back to God that you were talking about. I encouraged students, if they're in a situation like that, to do what I did. And a mentor told me, "Hey, Michael, every time you feel like your worth is less because of your surroundings or someone else, I want you to look in a mirror and I want you to get in touch with what you see."
Hmm.
And that was painful.
Hmm.
I was young.
Mm-hmm.
I was, I think, a senior in high school. When I looked in the mirror, I did not see someone that I liked.
Yeah.
I saw someone that other people thought was less than, or I thought I was less than. And he said, "I want you to then say who God says you are,
Mm-hmm.
that you are a valuable man of God who's loved." And I'm like, "That's crazy." Like, that's weird. Like, I'm in high school. Guys don't say that to themselves. They don't look at the mirror, but he's like, "I want you to still do it."
Yeah.
And I did that, I think, every day for a year.
Wow.
And that was just a coming back to what God says of me.
Mm-hmm.
And after a year, I would look in the mirror and it would still never be like a perfect, but I started to understand that I didn't deserve it, but God loved me,
Mm-hmm.
and my identity is in Him. And there's this invitation of when we come back to God in different areas and let Him carry us and embrace what He says about us, that we get to live in the freedom that only He can give us. We get to live in the way that he created us to live.
Mm-hmm.
But I love what you're saying. It takes this decision to pivot
Yeah.
and to go back.
Yeah. And to accept that love. Like, this is such a beautiful picture of God's love for his children, that he loves us so much that when other people think that we don't deserve his love, and when we think that we don't deserve his love, and in reality, when we don't deserve his love, really, he still just gives that lovely gift of grace and love to us, no matter what.
That's so good. And maybe to end, I just want to double down on that idea. And, I don't think we were planning to end this way, but here we are. Man, if you are listening to this podcast and you feel less than, if you're listening to this and something is going on in your life, there's a struggle, maybe just hard news that you're wrestling with, maybe there's a relational thing, or maybe how you view yourself is less than how God views you, or man, you just keep going to something that you know you shouldn't go to. The prodigal son in that culture offended his father so much that any Jewish listener who was listening, the Pharisees who were listening to Jesus say this parable, was like, he is dead to his father.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he is outcast. He is no longer a son. That was his status. He messed up so much that it was offensive for the son to even think that he could come back to his father.
Yeah.
But the son did. And then we get different cultural things that might be missed in our kind of 21st century reading.
Right.
The father, like, he was probably a very wealthy man in a large estate. They didn't really run, but he ran. The father was looking out on the horizon for him. He was anticipating and hoping that his son would come back. He gave sandals on his feet that says, "You are not a servant. You are a much higher status than that." He put rings on his fingers saying, "You are back in the family." And he killed a fatted calf and did this huge celebration. So wherever you're at right now, this bold claim that we can read in the Bible in the parable of the lost son is for you. You might not think you deserve it. You might think, how can I ever go back? Or how can this situation ever get better? But this bold claim that God gave you is that you're welcome back. Turn. He's going to run towards you. He's going to give you the dignity that other people, or maybe yourself, you might not even give yourself. He loves you.
Yeah.
And I think that's a word that we all need.
Absolutely.
In different ways.
Yeah, you're right.
So there you go.
Well, this is a hard pivot, but
It's hard.
This is our
there you go. Yeah.
penultimate episode. Last week is our last episode for this series. We are going to have a guest next week.
Yeah.
The distinguished Charles Yu is going to be joining with us. So if you have questions, please submit them. Remember, our email address is podcast@blackhawkchurch.org. Otherwise, you're just going to hear Michael's and my questions for Charles. So,
And I got a lot.
I mean, after hearing your hot takes today, I feel like you probably do. So
Charles has some hot takes too.
We should ask Charles for his hot takes next week.
We should. I know a couple of them, and they are so good. I can't say it. Well, okay, we're definitely going to ask him. They're so good.
Okay, great.
I'm sure he'll share.
Submit your questions and stay tuned for hot takes from all of us.
Stay tuned. We'll see you here next week for our last episode.
Bye.